Everyone lied to the Elf King. His ministers told him the harvest was abundant, while children in the southern villages learned to sleep through hunger. His generals told him the border was peaceful, while frightened farmers sharpened tools beside their beds. His courtiers told him he looked rested, handsome, beloved. Every lie struck the ancient crown bound to his blood like a wineglass breaking behind his eyes. King Edrian had endured that sound for 147 years. Then, on a rain-soaked night 3 weeks before the harvest oath, he found a human baker alone in the royal kitchen, flour on her cheek and smoke rising from a ruined tray of honey cakes. She looked at his fine coat, his tired face, and the goblet he had not touched. She did not bow. She did not flatter him. She simply said, "You look lonely." For the first time in longer than she had been alive, the Elf King heard the truth, and it did not hurt. Cora Lark did not know she was speaking to the king. If she had known, she might have chosen different words. She would not have lied, exactly, but she might have arranged the truth more politely. She had arrived with 2 dresses, 3 wooden spoons, and a clay jar of sourdough starter older than she was. The summons called her one of the finest human bakers in the southern wards. Cora suspected she was merely the only one foolish enough to accept. Her bakery stood in Claybrook, a human district at the southern edge of the elven capital. The shop was called Lark Bread because her grandmother had possessed neither poetry nor patience. It had a cracked oven, a leaking roof, and a door that swelled shut in rain. It also fed half the street. Every dawn, Cora baked brown loaves for laborers, seed rolls for schoolchildren, and soft milk bread for the elderly. Customers who could not pay left food, firewood, or promises. She accepted all 3, though promises were the least useful. Then the royal palace announced that the harvest oath would include 1 human baker for the first time in 800 years. The chosen baker would prepare the ceremonial first loaf beside the king. The payment was enough to rebuild Cora's oven and keep Claybrook supplied through winter. High Steward Halvin himself came to offer her the position. He arrived in a white carriage that blocked the entire street. He was a narrow, elegant elf with smooth black hair, amber eyes, and gloves so pale they seemed offended by the neighborhood. He entered Lark Bread while Cora was pulling rye loaves from the oven. "Mistress Lark," he said, looking around the shop as though poverty might leap onto his clothes. "Your reputation has reached the palace." The compliment sounded rehearsed. Cora set a hot loaf on the cooling rack. "My smoke probably reached it first. The chimney leans north." Halvin did not smile. His Majesty wishes to honor the human wards by selecting one of their own for the harvest oath. Does His Majesty know that? The steward's amber eyes narrowed. I speak with the king's authority. That was not my question. Her neighbor, Old Bram, made a choking noise behind a basket of rolls. Cora ignored him. Halvin placed a contract on the counter. You will reside in the palace for 3 weeks. You will follow the instructions of the royal kitchen. You will not address the king unless invited. You will not bring unauthorized ingredients inside the northern gates. If your work is judged acceptable, Claybrook will receive a royal grant for its communal ovens. Cora read the payment twice. With that money, no family on her street would have to choose between buying grain and repairing a chimney before snow. Why me? The selection committee found your bread suitably rustic. There it was. Not excellent, not skilled, rustic. Human enough to be displayed beside the king, unimportant enough to remove after the applause. Cora signed anyway. The royal kitchen was larger than her entire street. 6 ovens lined one wall, copper pans hung from ceiling racks, and blue fire burned beneath silver kettles. The elven cooks moved with silent efficiency. They disliked her immediately. Royal Baker Senel, a tall elf with translucent spectacles and a mouth permanently tightened by disappointment, inspected Cora's hands before allowing her near the flour. "Human nails carry yeast sickness," he said. "So do dirty elven nails. Fortunately, mine are clean. You will use palace starter." I brought my own. She placed the clay jar on the counter. Senel looked at the bubbling mixture as if she had unveiled a swamp animal. "How old?" 62 years. My grandmother started it the winter the river froze. "Unregulated fermentation." A live food rarely waits for permission. By sunset, Cora had been assigned a narrow sleeping room above the kitchens and ordered to produce 200 honey cakes for the next morning's council breakfast. She was given pale palace flour, imported orange blossom honey, and a recipe written by an elf who clearly believed sweetness could compensate for the absence of butter. The first batch rose too quickly, then collapsed. The second browned at the edges while remaining raw inside. At midnight, the third batch smoked. Cora dragged the tray from the oven and swore at it with feeling. "Is that part of the human baking process?" a man's voice asked behind her. She spun around. He stood in the kitchen doorway without guards. He was the tallest elf she had ever seen, broad through the shoulders beneath a dark green coat. White gold hair fell loose past his collar, framing sharply elegant features and long, pointed ears. His eyes were an unusual violet, luminous even in the low firelight. A thin silver circlet rested against his brow. Cora noticed the circlet. She did not recognize it. "It is the part where I explain to the cakes why they have disappointed me," she said. The stranger looked at the blackened tray. "Do they improve after criticism?" "People rarely do. Cakes are sometimes more reasonable." He stepped inside. His movements were controlled, but exhaustion lived in the line of his mouth. There was a stillness around him that did not feel peaceful. It felt practiced. "You are the human baker. And you are stealing food from the royal kitchen after midnight." "Stealing?" "That goblet in your hand came from the king's table. Your coat costs more than my building, so you are either a nobleman or a remarkably ambitious thief." His gaze dropped to the untouched goblet. "Perhaps I was invited." "No one invited comes through the service door, looking as though he hopes the walls won't notice him." The stranger stared at her. For one uncertain second, Cora wondered whether she had crossed some invisible line and was about to spend the rest of the festival cleaning ovens. Then he asked, "What do I look like?" It was a strange question. His face was beautiful in the distant way of moonlit statues. His coat was immaculate. His hair shone in the firelight. Yet he held himself like a man standing alone in a crowded room. "You look lonely," she said. The goblet slipped half an inch in his fingers. Every blue flame in the kitchen leaned toward him. "Say that again." Cora set down the smoking tray. "You look lonely. Also tired, but mostly lonely." He closed his eyes. She had the unsettling impression that her words had touched something beneath his skin. "Was that rude?" she asked. "Yes." "Was it wrong?" His eyes opened. "No." Footsteps approached from the corridor. The kitchen doors flew wide and 4 royal guards entered with drawn blades. Behind them came High Steward Halvin, his face white with alarm. Every person in the room dropped to one knee, except Cora. She looked at the stranger, the silver circlet, and the guards bowing around him. "Oh," she said. King Edrian watched her understanding arrive. "Remarkably ambitious thief?" Cora lowered herself into the least graceful bow performed in palace history. Your Majesty. Haven looked ready to faint. This human entered your presence without permission. She will be removed immediately. The lie cracked inside Edrian's skull. Not the claim that Cora lacked permission, that was technically true. The lie lived in the steward's eagerness, in the suggestion that protocol mattered more than whatever had just occurred. The crown of echoes did not explain lies. It merely punished him with their sound. She will remain, Edrian said. Haven recovered quickly. Of course, Your Majesty. I only wished to protect your privacy. Another crack. Thinner this time, carefully shaped. Edrian looked at Cora. Flour marked her cheek. Her hair, dark chestnut and thick with natural curls, had escaped its knot around her face. Her green eyes held embarrassment, caution, and no false reverence at all. Bring me one of the cakes, he said. They are burned. I know. She selected the least ruined cake and placed it on a small plate. Edrian broke it open. Smoke escaped the center. He ate a piece while the kitchen staff watched in horror. It is terrible, he said. Cora folded her arms. Finally, someone honest in this palace. The crown of echoes remained silent. The next morning, Cora was summoned to the private solar before breakfast. She expected dismissal. Instead, she found Edrian seated beside an arched window overlooking the capital, with 3 untouched trays of food on the table. In daylight, he looked even less human. His white gold hair seemed to hold its own pale light, and the violet of his eyes deepened when he looked at her. The circlet was gone, but its magic remained. A faint silver line traced his temples, disappearing beneath his hair. Sit, he said. Cora sat across from him. Royal Baker Senel reports that your honey cakes failed because you ignored his method. His method ignores butter. We are both disappointed. High Steward Halvin reports that the human ovens are functioning well, and the southern wards are grateful for the crown's generosity. Cora stared at him. Claybrook's communal oven has a crack wide enough to lose a cat in. We haven't received royal grain in 2 months. The truth entered the room without breaking. Edrian's jaw tightened. 2 months? 11 weeks if you count properly. We do. Hunger encourages accurate calendars. My reports state that every southern district received its full allotment. Then your reports are lying. The word rang softly in the solar, not as pain but as recognition. Edrian stood and walked to the window. Far below, the golden roofs of the inner city shone between ancient trees. Beyond them, hidden beneath the southern canopy, lay districts he had not entered in decades. Do you know what the Crown of Echoes is? He asked. A royal ornament with an alarming name? It is a bond placed upon the rulers of Avaloon. Every deliberate lie spoken in my presence sounds like glass breaking inside my head. Cora's expression changed from skepticism to concern. Every lie? Every one. That sounds useful. It did to me when I was 20. And now? Now I know how often people lie about the weather. Despite herself, Cora smiled. Edrian turned from the window. My ministers know about the crown. They have become skilled at speaking around it. They offer fragments of truth and allow me to build the wrong picture. The southern ovens are functioning because one oven in each district still works. The grain was delivered because carts crossed the district line before turning elsewhere. That is still lying. The crown was made by kings. It has a king's understanding of honesty, meaning it notices the words and ignores the person saying them. Precisely. Cora looked at the untouched breakfast. Why tell me? Because last night you said something no one in this palace has dared to say in years. That your cakes were terrible? That I was lonely. The humor left her face. Edrian came around the table. Remain at the palace until the harvest oath. Prepare the first loaf. And when I ask you a question, tell me what you truly see. You want to employ me as a royal insult. An honest advisor. I am a baker. You noticed in 5 minutes what my council has concealed for years. I noticed you were wandering the kitchens alone at midnight. That does not qualify me to govern a kingdom. Apparently, it qualifies you more than several people currently doing it. Cora studied him. Power surrounded Edrian, but it did not soften the fatigue in his eyes. She understood the temptation of being needed. It had kept her at the bakery through winters when her hands cracked from cold and her accounts refused to balance. But she also understood how easily powerful people turned useful women into tools. I will bake your ceremonial loaf, she said. I will tell you the truth when you ask. But I will not spy on servants, expose private grief, or become a blade you point at people you already distrust. Agreed. And Claybrook receives its oven grant whether the court likes my bread or not. Edrian held out his hand. Agreed. His hand was cool and larger than hers. When Cora took it, the silver line at his temples flashed once. Did the crown just judge our bargain? She asked. No. The sharp crack made him flinch. Cora released his hand. You are a poor liar for a man who hears so many. The crown reacted to you. Why? I don't know. That answer was true. Cora's position in the palace changed by lunchtime. The servants who had ignored her now watched her. The cooks resented her. The nobles found reasons to pass through the kitchens and inspect the human curiosity who had breakfasted alone with the king. Royal Baker Senel was offended most of all. The first loaf has been prepared by elven hands since the founding, he said, thrusting an ancient recipe tablet toward her. Star grain flour, dawn milk, sun salt, and royal fire. The ruler needs 3 times and speaks the oath of plenty. The loaf rises, the fields answer. When did it last rise properly? Senel's mouth tightened. It always rises. A crack echoed from the corridor. King Edrian stood in the doorway. Senel went pale. Cora looked at the recipe tablet. How high did it rise last year? Adequately. Crack. The year before? The ceremony was considered successful. Crack. Edrian pressed 2 fingers to his temple. Cora took the tablet from Senel. Bring me a slice from last year's loaf, if one remains. The baker hesitated, then retrieved a preserved ceremonial piece from a glass cabinet. It was dense, gray, and hard enough to stop a door. Cora tapped it against the counter. You could build a second palace with these. Edrian laughed. The sound startled everyone, including him. It was not the polite breath of amusement he used at council dinners. It was warm, deep, and entirely unpracticed. Cora looked at him, and something inside her shifted before she could stop it. For the next week, the Elf King came to the kitchen every night. At first, he claimed he was inspecting preparations. On the second night, he watched Cora feed her starter. On the third, she handed him an apron. Edrian held the plain linen as if it were a diplomatic challenge. What is this? Protection for your expensive coat? I know what an apron is. Then we are making progress. Put it on. He did. The royal guards outside the door stared straight ahead with heroic discipline. Cora placed a mound of dough before him. The first loaf requires the ruler to knead. Have you ever kneaded anything? I have commanded armies. Dough is less impressed by titles. Use the heel of your hand. Fold, turn, press. Edrian pressed too hard. The dough split and stuck to his fingers. You attacked it. You said press. I did not say conquer. She stepped behind him and placed her hands over his. His body went still. The kitchen seemed to shrink around them. Cora guided the motion slowly. Fold, turn, press. His hands were cool beneath hers, his fingers elegant but scarred in places no court portrait showed. A strand of white gold hair brushed her wrist. Like that, she said, quieter than before. I see. He did not move away. Neither did she. The dough warmed beneath their joined hands. A soft gold light moved through it, then vanished. Cora stepped back. Was that royal magic? No. The crown cracked. She raised one eyebrow. Edrian looked almost embarrassed. Perhaps a little. No magic. Yeast works for a living. It deserves the chance to do its job. You defend it with unusual passion. It has never lied to me. He looked at her, and the humor between them softened into something else. Neither have you, he said. Cora turned toward the flour bin before he could see the effect of those words. The palace flour troubled her. Stargrain was supposed to carry a faint golden color and smell like toasted hazelnuts. The flour delivered to the royal kitchens was pale, dry, and nearly scentless. It absorbed too much water. The dough tore instead of stretching. Cora baked 3 test loaves, one with palace flour, one with flour she had brought from Claybrook, and one with equal parts of both. The palace loaf remained flat. Her own rose modestly. The mixed loaf developed thin black streaks beneath the crust. She carried all 3 to the council breakfast. The council chamber occupied the hollow center of a living silver oak. 12 elven ministers sat around a table grown from the trunk. High Steward Halvin stood at Edrian's right hand, reading harvest figures from a crystal slate. The northern stores remain at 80% capacity, he said. Exports have exceeded last year's expectations. There is no cause for concern. No crack came. Cora entered carrying the loaves. Halvin stopped. This is a closed council. The king asked for breakfast. Edrian looked at the bread, then at her face. Set it here. Cora placed the 3 loaves in front of him. The first is made from palace stargrain, the second from common human wheat. The third combines both. She cut open the palace loaf. Its center was gray and tight. Your flour is exhausted, she said. Either it was milled from grain harvested too early, stored in damp conditions, or stripped of its living germ before delivery. Minister after minister assured the king that storage standards were excellent. Glass broke behind Edrian's eyes until his knuckles turned white against the table. Halvin remained calm. The northern stores are full, Your Majesty. I inspected them personally. No crack. Cora broke the mixed loaf. Black threads webbed the crumb. Then show us. Halvin looked at her. A royal storehouse is no place for a baker. A storehouse full of baking grain seems exactly the place for one. Edrian stood. We leave in 1 hour. The northern royal storehouse was indeed full. Thousands of sealed sacks rose in perfect rows beneath a vaulted roof. Halvin spread his arms with restrained triumph. As reported. Cora walked between the stacks. She pressed one sack, then another. Grain shifted inside. The labels bore recent dates. The air smelled clean. Too clean. She drew a small bread knife and cut the corner from a sack in the rear row. Halvin moved forward sharply. You cannot damage royal property. Grain poured into Cora's palm. The kernels were beautiful, gold and unbroken. She bit one. It dissolved against her teeth. Wax, she said. Edrian took a kernel. It softened between his fingers, revealing a dark pebble at the center. The front rows contained grain. The rear sacks contained wax-coated gravel. Haven's face remained composed. I was not informed. The crown stayed silent. He was telling the truth. Who controls deliveries? Edrian asked. The Office of Provision under Minister Caro. Minister Caro was arrested before sunset. He confessed to falsifying inventories and selling royal star grain across the western border. He named 3 clerks and 2 merchants. He did not name Halvin. The court celebrated the discovery as if the problem had been solved. Cora did not. That night, Edrian found her on the kitchen steps, feeding crumbs to small blue birds that nested beneath the roof tiles. You think Caro is not responsible? He said. I think he is responsible for what he confessed to. I do not think one frightened minister taught wax to look like grain or redirected carts through 5 guarded gates without help. Haven did not lie. Neither did the storehouse. You saw what it wanted you to see. Edrian sat beside her. Kings were not supposed to sit on service steps, but he had begun doing several things the palace considered impossible. Haven was my father's steward, he said. He taught me the harvest laws. He stood beside me when the crown of echoes was bound. That makes him familiar, not innocent. You suspect everyone. I run a bakery that accepts promises as payment. Suspicion protects the butter. He smiled, but worry remained in his eyes. Come with me tomorrow, he said. Where? Claybrook. Your steward will arrange musicians, guards, and 6 children instructed to look well fed. Then he will not know. Cora turned to him. You are proposing to sneak out of your own palace. You accused me of doing that the night we met. I dislike leaving accusations unearned. They left before dawn wearing ordinary cloaks. Captain Taran, Edrian's broad-shouldered guard commander, followed at a distance with 2 soldiers disguised as merchants. Edrian covered his pointed ears beneath a hood, though nothing could make him look entirely ordinary. He was too tall, too graceful, and much too clean. Walk less like a king, Cora whispered as they entered the southern market. How does a king walk? As if the road was warned you were coming. Slouch a little. I do not slouch. That is the problem. She pulled his hood lower and caught him smiling beneath it. Claybrook was awake. Bakers stoked fires. Laborers crossed the lanes with empty lunch tins. A woman divided 1 apple among 4 children with a knife so thin the slices bent in the air. Edrian saw it. He saw the patched roofs, the dry fountain, the queue outside a grain shop whose shelves held more dust than flour. No one recognized him. No one lied to him, because no one knew he was listening. An old man told Cora that his royal ration had been cut again. A mother asked if she could pay for bread next week. 2 mill workers described carts of star grain passing south after midnight toward the private river docks. Each truth entered Edrian without breaking, and each one seemed to leave a mark. At Lark Bread, Cora forced the swollen door open with her shoulder. The shop smelled of old yeast, soot, and home. A bucket waited beneath the leaking roof. The oven crack had widened. Edrian walked to it and placed his palm against the brick. Pale gold magic moved through the mortar. The crack sealed. Absolutely not, Cora said. He looked over his shoulder. It was dangerous. You cannot repair 1 oven with magic and call the district saved. I did not. Good, because there are 37 more. 39, old Bram said from the doorway. If you count the school oven and Widow Sila's, which only works when kicked. Edrian lowered his hood. Old Bram dropped an entire basket of rolls. Within minutes, half the street crowded outside the bakery. Some bowed, some stared. A child asked whether his hair was naturally that color. Edrian answered questions until Captain Taran reminded him they had no official escort. Cora watched the king listen. He did not promise miracles. He asked names, amounts, dates. When people grew afraid and softened their complaints, he told them he needed the difficult truth. For the first time, she saw what he might be without the palace around him. They returned by the river path as rain began. Edrian raised a hand, and an invisible shield spread over them. The rain curved away from his shoulders and fell normally over Cora. She stopped. "Am I excluded from royal weather?" He looked alarmed. "I thought the shield covered you." "It covers exactly one elf king." "Come closer." Cora stepped beneath his arm. The shield widened at once. They walked shoulder to shoulder inside a circle of dry air while rain hammered the path around them. "Your magic has poor manners," she said. "It has little practice sharing space. Like its owner. You make a habit of insulting men who control the weather. Only lonely ones." He stopped walking. The river rushed beside them, silver under the rain. Cora became aware of how close his face was, of the violet light in his eyes, of one white gold strand resting against her damp cloak. "I am less lonely now," he said. Her heart gave one hard, inconvenient beat. "That sounds dangerous." "For whom?" "I haven't decided." His gaze lowered to her mouth. Then riders appeared on the road behind them, and the moment broke. High Steward Halvin approached beneath a white enchanted canopy, accompanied by 6 guards. His eyes moved from Edrian's arm around Cora to the wet human district behind them. "Your Majesty," he said, "the entire palace has been searching for you." Crack! Edrian's expression cooled. "Has it?" "The council feared for your safety." Crack! Halvin looked at Cora. "Mistress Lark should have understood the danger of taking the king beyond the protected wards." "I took her," Edrian said. "Of course. I intended no accusation." Crack! Cora saw the pain flash across Edrian's face. Halvin saw it too. The steward knew exactly what he was doing. On the ride back to the palace, Halvin spoke often. Nothing he said mattered. A remark about the rain. An assurance that Claybrook's records were already under review. A polite hope that Cora had not been frightened by the district's rougher streets. Each sentence was shaped to sound harmless, and each one brought that tiny tightening to Edrian's jaw. By the time they passed beneath the silver gates, blood had begun to run from his left nostril. Cora caught his wrist before he could dismount. "Stop talking to him," she told Halvin. The guards went still. No one addressed the High Steward in that tone. Halvin's smile did not change. "I have only expressed concern." Another crack. Edrian swayed. Cora slid from her horse and pulled the king down after her. "And now you're done." She led him through the nearest side door, ignoring Halvin's protest and the startled servants who flattened themselves against the walls. Edrian could have resisted. He was stronger than she was, and a command from him would have stopped her at once. Instead, he let her take him all the way to the royal kitchen. The ovens had gone dark for the night. Cora sat him on the flower chest, wet a cloth, and pressed it into his hand. "Head forward, not back." "You order kings very naturally." "You bleed very inconveniently." He obeyed. The room smelled of cooling stone and yesterday's bread. Rain drummed against the high windows. In the quiet, without courtiers pressing words at him, the strain gradually left his shoulders. Cora found a heel of rye and spread it with salted honey. She put it into his free hand. Eat. Is bread your answer to every disaster? Most disasters become worse on an empty stomach. He took a bite. For several minutes they said nothing. It was not the brittle silence of the throne room, where everyone waited for permission to breathe. It was an ordinary quiet, the kind shared by people who had worked beside each other long enough to stop fearing every pause. Edrian looked at the bread in his hand. Haven was my father's closest advisor. He taught me the names of the border rivers. He stood beside me when they placed the crown on my head. That doesn't mean he loves you. No crack came. The words were blunt, but not cruel. I know, Edrian said. Do you? His gaze lifted to hers. Cora softened her voice. You know he is hiding something. But part of you still wants the man who helped raise you to have a good reason. Is that foolish? It is human. I am not human. No. But you are lonely, stubborn, tired, and bad at accepting help. We recognize the type. The corner of his mouth moved, then the small smile disappeared. When you speak, he said, the crown becomes quiet, even when the truth is difficult. I do not understand why. Cora remembered the silver light that had moved beneath his skin when they touched. She also remembered the way his arm had closed around her in the rain, drawing her into warmth as though there were no other place she belonged. Perhaps it likes bread. Perhaps it likes you. Her pulse quickened. Edrian set the cloth aside. The bleeding had stopped. That is the most dangerous possibility. For whom? This time, no riders interrupted them. He stood. They were close enough that she could see rain caught in his pale lashes and the faint silver veins of magic at his temples. He raised one hand, slowly enough to give her time to move away, and touched a damp curl beside her cheek. I still haven't decided, he said. Then the kitchen door opened. Captain Terran entered with his sword half drawn. He took in the king, Cora, and the narrow distance between them. With impressive discipline, his face revealed nothing. Your Majesty, Mr. Slark, we found something beneath the northern storehouse. Edrian's hand fell. Beneath the false sacks was a tunnel leading beyond the city wall. Its stone floor had been worn smooth by cartwheels. Terran soldiers found broken seals from royal granaries, invoices bearing invented merchant names, and a ledger written in a private numerical code. There was enough evidence to prove that someone had moved grain out of Avaloon for years, but no signature led directly to Halvin. He had been too careful for that. The following morning, Edrian removed 3 ministers and ordered the private docks searched. He opened the emergency granaries under military guard and sent the first wagon south. Halvin stood at his usual place beside the throne. A decisive response, he said. Your people will be grateful. The crown made no sound. The sentence was true. That was the worst of Halvin's gift. He could lay truth over a lie like clean linen over a corpse. After council, Cora found him waiting in the corridor outside the royal kitchen. You have achieved a great deal in a short time, he said. Have I? The king leaves the palace in secret. Ministers are arrested. Storehouses are opened. All because a baker disliked her flour. The flour was rotten. Many things are rotten. Wise people learn which ones can be cut away and which ones hold up the roof. Cora shifted the basket on her hip. Is that advice or a threat? Advice. Threats are such clumsy instruments. He stepped aside for her, graceful as a dancer. You may believe His Majesty values your honesty. At present, he does. But kings value what is useful, Mistress Lark. When usefulness ends, affection usually follows. Cora walked past him without answering. She refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing where the words landed. They landed anyway. That afternoon, invitations arrived for the Feast of First Light, the formal supper held 3 nights before the harvest oath. Cora's name had been written between an elven duchess and an ambassador from the Western Isles. She carried the card straight to Edrian Solar. No, he looked up from a field report. You have not heard the request. The gold edges made it clear. I am not attending a royal feast. Why? Because I own one dress without flower on it, and it was made for my cousin's funeral. Because half your court thinks humans should enter through the servants' door. Because every noblewoman in this palace has spent a century learning which fork to use for sugared pears. There will be no sugared pears. The Western orchards failed. That is the part you object to. I object to several parts. Most urgently, the funeral dress. She folded her arms. Why do you want me there? The question changed him. The kingly answer came first. She saw it form in the careful set of his mouth. Then he let it go. Because the room is easier to endure when you are in it. The truth settled between them, warm and frightening. That is not a fair reason, she said. No. And you should not need me in order to face your own court. No. And if anyone insults my shoes, I will step on theirs. I would be disappointed if you did not. She attended. When she entered the Hall of Moons, conversation thinned. Elves filled the room like living jewels. Their clothes shimmered with woven spells. Their hair held silver chains, moonstones, and flowers preserved from springs 100 years gone. At the far end, beneath a canopy of pale leaves, Edrian stood in black and silver. He saw Cora. For one unguarded moment, the loneliness left his face. He crossed the hall before anyone could announce her. You came. There are no sugared pears. I checked. You look beautiful. You look surprised. I am trying very hard not to. She smiled, and the watching court vanished from his attention. The musicians began after the final course. Edrian was expected to open the dancing with Lady Saleth, whose family controlled 3 northern forests. Halvin had arranged it. The court had discussed the likely marriage for months in sentences designed never to become direct claims. The king walked past Lady Saleth. He stopped before Cora and offered his hand. Dance with me. Every eye in the hall turned toward them. Cora looked at his waiting hand. I don't know the steps. Neither do half the people here. They have simply practiced looking offended when they miss them. She placed her hand in his. The first dance was slow, made of measured turns and gliding steps. Cora missed the second movement and stepped squarely on his boot. Your threat was not limited to insults, then, he murmured. You were warned. He guided her around the polished floor. Beneath his palm, the middle of her back felt too warm. His fingers closed gently around hers, not like a king claiming what the room offered, but like a man asking her to remain. They are staring, she said. Let them. Halvin looks as though he swallowed a nail. Let him. Lady Saleth may poison my tea. Edrian's expression sharpened. That was a joke, Cora said. A poor one. I have little practice with them. You need more honest people around you. I need one particular honest person very near me. His voice had dropped. The music carried them beneath the branches of the silver canopy, where the candlelight softened and the court could no longer read their lips. Edrian, she whispered, It was the first time she had used his name. His hand tightened at her back. Say it again. That seems a very kingly order. It is a very unkingly request. She looked into his violet eyes. Edrian. The crown's silver light stirred beneath his skin, but there was no pain in it. The air around them warmed. Somewhere beyond the windows, a row of dormant moonflowers opened in the palace garden. He bent his head. Cora rose slightly toward him. The music stopped. Applause crashed through the hall. They separated with a breath between their mouths. It was the second time they almost kissed, and Cora began to suspect the entire kingdom was conspiring against her for reasons unrelated to grain. Near midnight, she returned to the kitchen and found her sourdough starter on the floor. The clay crock had shattered. 62 years of careful feeding spread across the stone in a pale, lifeless smear. Ash had been mixed through it. Not clean oven ash, which a skilled baker might sift away, but black residue from moonthorn, bitter and poisonous to yeast. Cora stopped breathing. Her grandmother had carried that starter through a winter siege. Her mother had fed it on the morning Cora was born. Every loaf sold from Lark Bread held a small living piece of their family. Now it was gray mud beneath her shoes. Senel found her kneeling beside it. "Oh," he said, and the grief in that one word nearly broke her. There was no saving the starter. They both knew it. Cora touched 2 fingers to the ruined mixture. Who had a key? The senior kitchen staff, the chamberlain, the high steward, 6 guards. Too many. I am sorry. She wiped her fingers on her apron. She would not cry on the floor where the person responsible might imagine her doing exactly that. "Bring me flour," she said. Senel stared. "Now?" "Now." She scraped a spoonful of clean dough from the bottom of the wooden mixing trough they had used before the feast. It might contain a trace of the old culture. It might contain nothing. She mixed it with warm water and good flour, set it near the oven, and waited. Edrian arrived before dawn. He took one look at her face and dismissed everyone else from the kitchen. "Tell me." She showed him the broken crock. Magic darkened the windows. Frost climbed the iron oven doors, delicate and furious. "I will find who did this." "You may not." "I will." "And if you don't? Will you arrest everyone who owned a key? Will you make them speak while the crown tears your skull apart?" The frost thickened. Cora stood. Her grief wanted someone to punish. Her fear wanted her back in Claybrook, behind a door she could bar. But the man before her was already carrying both emotions as though they were his own. "Don't turn my loss into an excuse to become cruel," she said. The frost stopped spreading. Edrian closed his eyes. Slowly, the magic withdrew from the room. "I don't know how you can ask that of me." "Because I know what cruelty does to bread. It makes people afraid to share it." He opened his eyes. "I am sorry, Cora." She had heard nobles offer sympathy all evening. Their voices had been polished, their expressions perfect. Those words had meant nothing. His meant too much. The tears came then. Edrian crossed the kitchen in 2 steps and caught her against him. Cora pressed her face to his chest. He held her without command or question, one hand cradling the back of her head. His heart beat hard beneath the black silk of his feast coat. "It was alive," she said. "That sounds foolish." "No." "It knew my grandmother's hands." "Then we will remember it." "We." The word did what comfort could not. It gave her somewhere to place the next breath. On the table behind them, a single bubble rose through the new mixture. Neither of them saw it. At sunrise, 12 members of the High Council fell ill. They had all eaten the small ceremonial rolls baked for the Feast of First Light. The rolls contained sleep mold, a rare fungus that caused fever, weakness, and vivid dreams. It was seldom fatal, but it was expensive and tightly controlled by royal healers. The flower on Cora's sleeves carried traces of it. So did a paper packet found beneath her bed. The royal guards came to the kitchen before breakfast. Captain Taran looked sick with shame. "Mistress Lark, I must ask you to surrender your knife." Cora handed it over. Edrian stood between her and the guards. "She did not poison anyone." "I did not," Cora said. The crown remained silent. Truth. But truth alone did not explain the packet. It did not erase the flower. It did not satisfy frightened council families already demanding that the human baker be imprisoned. Halvin entered the kitchen with 2 healers behind him. "No one wishes to believe this," he said. Crack! Edrian flinched. "The evidence must be examined without favor." No crack. "Until then, keeping Mistress Lark in a comfortable, guarded chamber will protect her as much as the court." No crack. Again, Halvin had built a cage out of facts. Cora looked at Edrian. She knew what he wanted to do. She saw it in the white flame beginning at the edges of his irises. "A guarded room," she said. "Not a cell. Taran keeps the key. No one enters without him." "Cora, if you break your own laws for me, Halvin wins something larger than this argument." The flame receded. Edrian turned to Taran. "If she is harmed, there is no wall in Avaloon that will protect the person responsible." Halvin inclined his head. "A reasonable precaution." Crack. The guarded chamber had a soft bed, a painted ceiling, and no oven. Cora hated it more than she would have hated a dungeon. Edrian came after dark, and Taran remained outside the door. "Halvin told me kings value what is useful," Cora said. Edrian's face went still. "He wanted me to wonder whether you keep me near because I quiet the crown." "Do you wonder?" "Yes." The answer hurt him. She saw that it did, and she would not take it back. "When I am with you," he said slowly, "the crown is quieter. That is true. At first, I asked you to stay because I wanted that silence." Cora looked toward the barred window. "But silence is not why I wait for midnight," he continued. "It is not why I know the sound you make when dough has taken enough flour, or why I can find you in a crowded hall without looking for anyone else. It is not why I wanted to tear this palace apart when I saw your broken crock." She turned back. Edrian's hands lay open on the table. He wore no rings, no ceremonial gloves, nothing between his skin and the scarred wood. "You are useful to the crown," he said. "You are dangerous to the king." That is not a declaration most women would enjoy. I have never made one before. I noticed. "Cora, I do not know how to be less than what they made me. But when I am with you, I want to learn." The room seemed to narrow around them. She reached across the table. His fingers met hers. The silver light flared at his temples and traveled down his wrist, crossing into her skin like a thread of warm moonlight. This time, neither of them pulled away. "Do you know what it means?" she asked. "No." No crack. "Good," Cora whispered. "One mystery at a time." He leaned across the table and kissed her. There was nothing royal about it, no practiced grace, no measured courtship. His mouth found hers with a hunger made sharper by restraint. Cora caught the front of his coat and drew him closer. The bond of silver light brightened between their joined hands, and every candle in the room sprang into flame. Adrian made a startled sound against her lips. She smiled and kissed him again. When they finally separated, his forehead rested against hers. "I should have done that in the rain," he said. "You should have done it under the silver trees." "I was interrupted." "Twice?" "I am the king. I could outlaw interruptions." "That sounds cruel." "You are a terrible influence." Outside the door, Taryn coughed loudly. Cora closed her eyes. 3 times. Adrian laughed, and it was the happiest sound she had heard in the palace. The evidence cleared her the next morning. Fennel discovered that the sleep mold had not been baked into the rolls. It had been dusted over them afterward with a fine sugar sieve while Cora was in the ballroom. Taryn found the missing sieve in a corridor used by the High Steward's clerks. The clerk who had carried it was found dead in the river before he could be questioned. Halvin expressed horror. The crown did not crack. He had not said he was surprised. Cora was released, but the court's suspicion did not vanish. Servants stepped away when she passed. Noble guests refused bread from the royal ovens. Messages began arriving from Claybrook. Strangers had painted "Traitor" across the shutters of Larkbread, and someone had thrown stones through the upper windows. Adrian wanted to send guards. "Uniforms will make it worse," Cora said. "People will think I brought royal soldiers into the district. Then I will go with you. You have a kingdom to prepare for the harvest oath." "You are part of that kingdom." She loved him a little for saying it. She feared she loved him much more than a little. That night, bells rang from the southern wall. Fire lit the sky over Claybrook. Larkbread was burning. By the time Cora and Adrian reached the district, flames had swallowed the roof. Neighbors formed a chain from the well, passing buckets through smoke and sparks. The communal oven next door had already cracked from the heat. Cora ran toward the bakery. Adrian caught her around the waist. "No." "My mother's recipe book is upstairs." "No." "There are people in the rooms behind it." That changed everything. A child's face appeared at an upper window. Adrian released Cora and lifted both hands. White gold magic struck the burning doorway, forcing the flames apart. He went in before the guards could stop him. Cora followed. Smoke erased the familiar rooms. Shelves fell in showers of sparks. She found old Mara from the adjoining house collapsed beside the back stairs, and dragged her toward the door. Above them, wood groaned. Adrian came down with 2 children held against his chest. He pushed them into Cora's arms. "Take them. Come with me. There is another heartbeat upstairs." He turned back before she could answer. Cora carried the children out, handed them to waiting neighbors, and spun toward the bakery. The roof collapsed. The sound tore through her. For one endless second, there was only flame. Then the front wall burst outward in a storm of glowing bricks. Adrian stepped through the smoke, carrying a small dog beneath one arm. Blood covered the side of his face. His cloak was burning. Cora reached him first. She beat out the flames with her bare hands and pulled him away as the rest of the building folded into itself. "A dog!" she shouted, half sobbing. "You went back for a dog!" The animal licked his chin. "It had a heartbeat." "You impossible! Reckless!" She seized his face and kissed him in front of Claybrook, the royal guard, and anyone else who cared to stare. The district fell silent. Then one of the rescued children began to clap. Laughter moved through the crowd, shaken and exhausted. Someone cheered. Edrian wrapped his arms around Cora and kissed her as if no court had ever taught him to hide what he wanted. When they parted, soot streaked his white gold hair. "You look terrible," she whispered. "You look furious." "I am. I am less lonely now." Her anger broke around the tenderness of it. "So am I." The fire had begun in 3 places. Taran found moonthorn oil on the alley stones, the same bitter substance used to kill Cora's starter. A cart had been seen leaving for the private docks just before the bells rang. This time there was a witness, a 13-year-old flower runner named Pell, who knew the driver and had stolen the man's purse while everyone watched the flames. Inside it was a brass token bearing Halvin's household mark. Edrian ordered the High Steward confined to his chambers. They found the rooms empty. Halvin had vanished. At dawn, while healers dressed the burn along Edrian's shoulder, Cora searched through the remains of her bakery. Most of the upper floor was gone. The mixing tables were charcoal. Her mother's recipe book had burned with everything else. She found one object intact beneath a fallen iron tray. A small jar of dried starter she had forgotten years ago. The culture might be dead. It might wake with flour and patience. Edrian crouched beside her despite the healer's orders. Can it be saved? Perhaps. You dislike that word. Bakers prefer measurements. What does it need? Warmth, food, time. His gaze held hers. So do kingdoms. And kings. And bakers. She put the jar in his uninjured hand. Together they carried it back to the palace. The harvest oath was 2 days away. Without the first loaf, the old magic would not wake the fields. Without the fields, even the opened granaries would only delay hunger. Cora fed the rescued starter, but the mixture lay flat and silent in its bowl. Taran brought news near midnight. Halvin had been seen beneath the ceremonial hall, where roots from the ancient star grain fields passed under the palace. He had taken 3 barrels of moonthorn oil and the coated ledger from the storehouse. He means to burn the roots, Edrian said. They found Halvin beside the royal oven. The ceremonial chamber lay deep beneath the throne room. Its walls were living roots turned silver with age. At the center stood an oven built from the first stones of Avaloon, cold for all but 1 morning each year. Halvin had poured a dark ring of oil around it. "Do not come closer," he said. He held a flame between 2 gloved fingers. Taran and 6 guards waited behind Cora, but 1 spark would be enough. Edrian stepped forward. His injured shoulder was bound beneath his coat. "You starved my people. I kept the kingdom dependent on merchants I could control. There is a difference." The crown made no sound. A confession at last. "You killed your own clerk." He was careless. "You burned Claybrook." "I gave Avaloon an enemy it was ready to believe in." Cora watched Edrian absorb each truth. They hurt more than lies, but they did not rule him. "Why?" he asked. Halvin's flame trembled. "Because your father understood what humans are. Brief lives, endless appetites. He knew peace would make the old houses weak. Then you began opening gates, granting trades, speaking of one kingdom. I preserved the order he entrusted to me. My father entrusted you with fear. You mistook it for order." Halvin looked at Cora. "And you mistake desire for wisdom. She will age while you remain unchanged. She will make you divide your crown for people who will never love you." Edrian reached for Cora's hand. "Perhaps," he said, "but those are my mistakes to make." Halvin dropped the flame. Cora moved first. She threw the bowl of wet starter she had been carrying. It struck the stone below the flame, smothering the spark in a burst of flour and water. Edrian's magic swept through the chamber an instant later, freezing the oil before it could catch. Taran took Halvin to the ground. The rescued starter dripped down the side of the ancient oven. Cora stared at it. That was all I had. Edrian looked from the ruined mixture to Halvin in chains. I am beginning to understand why you dislike interruptions. She laughed. She could not help it. After fire, grief, and fear, laughter came like air into a sealed room. Then a soft sound rose beneath them. The silver roots were drinking the spilled starter. Warm light moved through the floor. The ancient oven opened by itself, and for the first time in living memory, its empty hearth began to glow. On the morning of the harvest oath, the hall of first light filled with nobles, soldiers, bakers, farmers, and citizens from every district. Edrian had ordered the doors left open. Claybrook stood beside the oldest elven houses. No one was placed behind a screen. Cora waited at the kneading table in her smoke-stained apron. The ritual book required the ruler to declare that Avaloon had known abundance, that its servants had been faithful, and that the crown had kept every promise. For generations, kings had spoken those beautiful lies, while the first loaf failed to rise. Edrian closed the book. He faced his people. Avaloon is hungry, he said. It is hungry because those trusted with grain stole it, and because I believed reports instead of looking into your faces. I called distance dignity. I called silence peace. I wore a crown that revealed lies, yet I allowed truth to be hidden from me. That failure is mine. No glass broke inside his mind. The silver roots brightened. I cannot promise that no one will hunger again. I can promise that no district will be invisible, no storehouse will remain closed to inspection, and no life will be worth less because it is shorter than mine. If I fail, you will have the right to say so where I can hear you. Then he turned to Cora. The court waited for her to bow. She did not. Your flower is still too old, she said. A startled laugh ran through the hall. Edrian smiled. Then show me what to do. They poured flour into the same bowl. Cora added salt, warm water, and a scrap of living dough gathered from the roots beneath the oven. Edrian mixed while she corrected his hands. Before the entire kingdom, the elf king pushed his sleeves above his elbows and kneaded beside a human baker. The dough warmed beneath their palms. It rose before they placed it in the oven. When the first loaf emerged, its crust shone gold and silver. The scent filled the hall, passed through the open doors, and rolled across Avaloon like summer rain. Far beyond the palace, stargrain lifted from dry earth. Green spread over the fields in widening circles. Orchard branches flowered. Empty wells rang as water returned. The crown of echoes cracked. Edrian staggered, and Cora caught him. Silver fragments rose from his brow, turning slowly in the air. The hall cried out. But the pieces did not fall. They became light, sinking beneath his skin until only a thin silver mark remained above his heart. The crown had not been made to punish lies forever. It had been made to teach a ruler to seek truth freely. Edrian had finally done so. He broke the loaf with Cora. The first pieces went to 2 children from Claybrook. Halvin's ledgers exposed every false merchant and hidden dock. His confiscated wealth rebuilt the southern ovens and repaid the farmers whose grain had been stolen. Cora rebuilt Larkbread with wider doors and 2 ovens. She also kept a room in the palace, though she refused every title Edrian offered. He visited Claybrook without disguises now. Children climbed onto his shoulders. Neighbors argued with him about water pipes. He learned that being loved by a kingdom felt less like applause and more like being handed a list of repairs. Months later, Cora found him alone in the bakery after closing. He stood beside the new starter crock, feeding it with the concentration of a man negotiating a treaty. "Too much water," she said. "I followed your instructions." "You followed the measurements. You ignored the dough." "It did not speak." "You have to learn how to listen." Adrian looked at her. "I am trying." He held out his hand. On his palm lay no crown jewel, only a small ring carved from the wood of Cora's old mixing table, rescued from the fire. "I will not ask you to leave your bakery," he said. "I will not ask you to become quiet, agreeable, or less human. I ask only whether you will spend your years beside me and let me spend mine deserving them." Cora's eyes filled. "That was almost a perfect speech." "Almost?" "You forgot the most important part." He frowned. "Which part?" She touched his cheek. "You still look lonely." For one breath, the old sadness returned to his eyes. Then he understood. "Only when you stand that far away." Cora stepped into his arms. "Then yes," she whispered, and kissed him while bread cooled around them and the living starter rose quietly beneath the moon. If this story reminded you that one honest heart can reach even the loneliest king, subscribe to Elf Romance, tell us in the comments which moment touched you most, and return for more original fantasy love stories.